Welcome to the NP-POW videocast, a space where I will talk to nurse practitioner experts who will share their POWs, or pearls of wisdom, on an array of healthcare topics. I am your host, Dr. Julia Rogers, a certified nurse practitioner. And today we are lucky and honored to have Dr. Scarlet Spain with us to discuss international collaborations. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Spain. It really is an honor to have you on the NP-POW videocast.
Hi, Dr. Rogers. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Me as well. It's something that I don't really know a lot about, so I'm very excited. First, why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself, your passions, and then really what inspired you to become not only a nurse practitioner, but a leader in developing these vital international collaborations?
Yeah, great question. So to answer that, I kind of have to go from the start with my practice and how this kind of developed. I would say, and you probably remember this, when we were in school, we had a really incredible professor who would talk about consulting. And I was like, I want to do that, but I didn't know what it meant. So when I graduated, I did internal medicine for a very short time, like 6-9 months, something like that. And then I answered, this was back in 2009, responded to a little ad in the paper, like a little printed ad to work in the steel industry. So a heavy industrial setting. So I went for that interview and I just loved it. Like I walked in, felt like home. I think based on what my dad did for a living, what my husband does, it just really spoke to me. So I was lucky enough to obtain that job. So I started there in my 20s. I was quite young. And I worked there for close to a decade. When I started, I was a contractor. My kids were really small at the time. So I worked, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 days a week. As they got a bit older, I became an employee. And then at the end of the decade, from the time I was there, I had worked my way into management. So when I left, I was the wellness coordinator. When I started in that job, there was about 5,500 employees. When I left after the 10 years, there was like 3,500 just due to attrition. So I was the wellness coordinator, meaning that I brought in wellness activities. We did health fairs. We did biometric screening. I started a smoking cessation program. So all that kind of fell in my house. I was also labeled senior nurse practitioner and clinical process specialist. And those were some fancy terms they gave me to make me management. So from my knowledge, I was the first nurse to ever make management in the company. So that was really, really cool. What defined that job is different, being that it was such a large corporation. So we were one mill of like 270 across the world. So it was this huge corporation. And my job was very clinical, but way more than just clinical. So besides seeing injuries, doing surveillance exams, I was working with safety. So I was labeled as the head safety liaison. So if we had an injury or a near miss, and what a near miss is something that happened, some kind of event that could have caused a significant injury or a fatality, but luckily it didn't. So when we would have those things, I would work with safety to basically kind of recreate the event. Sometimes we would go out to the sites, put on our steel-toed boots, see what had happened and what we needed to do. So we would do a risk assessment on that. I worked with labor relations. I was involved in arbitrations. I worked with HR to look at needed restrictions and then making sure that the accommodations were safe, right? And that they were correct for what that employee needed. So that was kind of how my job started, as just being a nurse practitioner, and worked its way up to that, which was pretty unique. And I don't know that I fully recognized how unique it was at the time. I have very, very good memories of that job. So I left that job in 2018 to pursue academia full time. And my reasoning for that, I just wanted more flexibility. That was a hard job. I was on call half the month, and unfortunately, getting calls in the middle of the night over serious injuries and then not so serious injuries. So I just wanted more time with my kids. So I went into academia. I still maintain a clinical practice, doing occupational medicine. And I think if you talk to anybody in occupational medicine, we have a very same motto or goal in life, that we say that we want to send our employees home in the same condition they went to work in, or even better condition. And that's where a lot of that wellness activities came in for me. So that is kind of what we think of when we have this passion, right? So I continue to practice. As far as the consulting, that really fell in my lap, and I feel so blessed by that. My first consulting job is with a large staffing firm, and they reached out to me during COVID. So that would have been 2020 on LinkedIn. And I thought it was, I don't know, somebody trying to sell me something or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'll talk to these people, and it ended up being the coolest job. So that was such a blessing. So they hired me during COVID for It was a 4-month period, and I'm still with them 5 years later. So how my job kind of started there was during COVID, I was doing like social media appearances about the virus, and then also about vaccine uptake, and, trying to tell people that the vaccines were safe and this is what people should do to keep themselves safe. And then also the social distancing, wearing masks, all of that. Some of the bigger things that I did for that company was looking at states. We had built out a plan for one specific state in regards to how to deliver vaccines. So with that, it was a multi-level plan, right? So where would these vaccines be held at? What was the temperature they needed to be held at? How would people access those? Where was the temperature takers? And then for businesses, we built out like temperature taking stations. And then I did the education for those roles. So that was my first consulting job, which I still do. Now that we're not so focused in COVID, I'm really looking more at scope of practice with them now. So if we are placing an NP in Colorado, they'll tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, Scarlett, can you look at what Colorado needs and make sure that this collaboration looks fine, and kind of the legal documents of that. So that's been really cool. The international consulting very much came from my time at my heavy industrial job, just with those very niche processes and things that were outside of clinical. Is kind of how this landed in my lap. And same kind of thing, just from networking. Somebody that I've met a couple times, had a mutual friend, reached out to me, I've been with ASH 360 maybe a year and a half. So he reached out to me about a year and a half ago and presented this opportunity. And it was one of those things I'm like, I think I need to sit down because I didn't see this coming, and I feel so blessed. So I've been with them doing international consulting for, like I said, probably about a year and a half now.
I think you bring up such a great point, which is, I think when we're all new nurse practitioners, we're scared of networking sometimes, right? Because it's hard to introduce yourself and talk to other people. But you raised a really good point, which is networking can really open such a broad array of paths to go as an NP or, just in nursing in general.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and that's what the things that I'm doing now, I would have never seen myself doing. And I'm so proud, but mostly I just feel blessed, right? That it just has happened for me. So yeah, it's been incredible.
Well, you told us really kind of how that path started, going down to being involved in international collaborations. So now just let us know a little bit about some other types of international collaborations that maybe not only that you are a part of, but others that are just out there. And then how do they differ? Meaning, can you discuss differences between educational, clinical, and research collaborations?
Sure. I think with consulting too, and even I, before I started consulting, was confused about the term. So for listeners that are not so sure what that means, it means that you're providing expert knowledge in something. Now, to be perfectly honest, do I hold all that knowledge? No, I don't. So when I get asked a question that I don't know, I research it and then I'm going to cite, right? So when I'm giving my product back to who I'm consulting for, if it's simple, I may just respond, like if it's something that I know off the top of my head about scope of practice. If it's a different state or something international, I'm going to actually do that research and cite that. But to answer your question, so you can consult in anything. I mean, it doesn't even have to be nursing, right? Educational, I would definitely think with educational, that would be curriculum development, program development, bringing in experts who hold knowledge and who have done development before, or something to help the program. I mean, this could even be consulting related to gaining students, or increasing retention or something along those lines. Research, that would be providing expert advice, analysis, support for research projects. This could be various industries. Here we're talking about nursing, so that would most likely be nursing. And then clinical is what I do. And this is looking at clinical expertise and then advising and consulting responsibilities. So again, with my job with the staffing firm, that's definitely clinical. Sometimes they will ask me questions about OC Health as well. And then my job with ASH 360, very much clinical. So we are internationally looking, so that same tagline that I said earlier, right? To send employees in the same condition that they went to work in, or in better condition coming home from work. We are kind of focusing on that in the clinical piece. I hope I described that okay.
You did. As you were explaining those things, I was thinking another example really in education would probably be like Fulbright Scholar, right? Because
Yes.
then we cross lines with going over to other countries and being part of academia there. So I do think it's so broad.
Yes.
Like you said, it's not just when you use the word collaboration, it means something much bigger than just one sector within healthcare.
Yep. I think even all the mission work that we see being done, I mean, that is a collaboration, right?
Yes.
And I think consulting probably even falls in that too. If the mission work is bringing over a piece of knowledge that, I mean, it could even be related to a certain clinical component or whatever, if it's in a clinic, elsewhere or whatever.
Absolutely. And we just learn a lot about different countries, different cultures.
Yes.
So for nurse practitioners specifically, when they're looking to initiate an international collaboration, what do you think are the essential first steps that they should consider?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, first of all, you decide if you are going about this yourself or if you're going to have a partnership. Again, kind of describing what I've done, I've been incredibly lucky that I work for two companies. So they secure my jobs. I just kind of sit in the background and then they'll tap me on the back. Certain months get a little busier than other months, depending on what we have going on. But people can definitely do this themselves. The hard part with doing it yourself is that you have to find the business, right? And then you have to look at taxes and how you set up your business and all of that stuff, which I'm sure can be a little difficult. I would assume I have not had to do that. But I think the very first step is thinking about that. So how you want to go about this and what you want to do. So what are you an expert in? What kind of knowledge do you hold that is different or that I guess is just there that you could provide to somebody? And we all have it. And I think just taking that first step and identifying, okay, how am I different than other people? What knowledge do I hold? And then you want to define what you want to do. So what is your goal? What is your purpose? What is your mission? And then defining that. From there, you would want to do research. So is this needed? If you're looking internationally, try to find countries that this would be relevant in, that you could essentially sell your product, right? And then reaching out to potential partners. So find out how you're going to go about this. Figure out, I guess, first step would be figuring out what you're an expert in, what you could consult in, how you're going to go about this, defining goals or a mission, looking at research to see where this would be applicable and where this could be launched, and then reaching out to potential partners to see if this is something that they would be interested in.
Again, we all have to have those networking skills, right?
Yeah. Yep.
'Cause that's
Networking.
what-
Yeah. It's been incredible.
What do you think are some of the common challenges that are faced when you're establishing specifically international partnerships? And then how have you found a way to navigate those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So I would say the time zone difference is huge. Oftentimes when we recently worked on a project with a large international tech company, and we were working on, again, the whole thing, keeping their employees safe while they're at work, right? So it was really hard for me to figure out a time issue here when I was calling France or Germany or wherever. So I would literally have to wake up at 2 a.m. to do this. And it was fine. I figured it out. But the time zone difference is difficult sometimes to figure that out. And even, this sounds funny, but calling out internationally on my phone, I had no idea how to do it. It took me like 3 times and having to Google, like, how do I call company or whatever, because I just hadn't done that. Cultural differences is definitely something you have to think about too. So, and this is even over the telephone, how do different cultures gauge respect? Because obviously we need to respect them. We need to be kind, just like we would here in the US. Mm-hmm. And kind of looking at those different things. And then, of course, making sure that you're sticking to the task. So really clarifying logistics, roles, and then the scope of your projects. So when I'm working on these things, even if I'm on a phone call, I have a list that I have developed for myself that I stick to the task. And then even like an opening and ending that I say, thank you for taking this time to meet with me, just so that I can make sure that, again, I'm being polite and then I'm following exactly what I need to accomplish without going off task.
Agreed, because just as we want the same respect, reciprocal, right? And when we are dealing with other cultures, I do think it's important that we do our research and we understand where they're coming from, and so that we can meet together in order to form that collaboration.
Yes, for sure.
We know you brought up a good point, and we know that communication is key to anything. It's key to networking, it's key to our performance. But we also know that it's key in collaborating with others. So what kind of strategies, you mentioned a couple previously, but what would you recommend for effective communication, especially because not only did you talk about time differences, but there's language barriers.
Yes.
And so in international settings, what do you think we can do to better communicate with each other?
Yeah, so we know effective communication, it's going to be the backbone of success anywhere, right? Especially internationally. So again, before you start the work, and this is usually done with my boss, so the physician that I work for, I get from him exactly what the project, the scope of it is, and exactly what he wants me to accomplish. And then he trusts me and we work well together where he knows that I can accomplish it, but I make sure that it's crystal clear to me what I am looking for. Now, when you're dealing with international companies, again, those cultural nuances, which we kind of already talked about, tech preferences, I think is huge. So, I mean, even a lot of my work is on phone call, but if they have other ways that they prefer, trying to incorporate that as much as possible, which is difficult for me because I'm not a great person at tech. And then power dynamics. So making sure that just the way you present yourself is, this sounds so simple, but this is what I tell my kids too. The way you present yourself is kind, and that you are not, forcing information out of them, and that you are meeting them where they're at, and, just being kind with how you're going about doing this.
Well, you only have one time to make a first impression.
Yes. Yep. For sure. For sure. And then I would say another key thing that I definitely incorporate is watching my language, so that I'm not using slang words or slang language. I'm being clear in my communication about exactly what I'm trying to accomplish.
Even when I was researching things about international collaborations, because I don't do that. And so in order to talk to you today, I was doing my due diligence and also looking and figuring things out about how to form international collaborations. And what I found was really different healthcare systems, not just in the United States, but all across the world, have really varying different scopes of practice, and also communication styles and patient approaches. So in some countries, I found that, say, family involvement in medical decisions is really what's expected. But then in other cultures, it really is about individual autonomy. And so simple things like that, like, are you including the family? Are you not, when you're dealing with a collaboration as far as, say, clinical? I think it's important to research those aspects too, so that that's what you're bringing to the table instead of veering outside of what their norm is.
Absolutely. Yep.
How would you let us all know how to ensure that partners within a collaboration feel valued, feel like their voice is being heard, and also feel that their contribution is being recognized?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely establishing clear roles and expectations early. So if you are developing a proposal for a company internationally, really looking at defining those roles. So who is going to be doing what are the timelines, what are the expectations, clear and often communication. I have a project going on here in the States, but with a physician, and oftentimes, and I don't expect him to respond to me, but once a month I'm sending him an email like, this is where we're at, this is what it looks like, just so that he is aware of what I'm doing on my end, so he doesn't think that I'm just off, forgetting that the project is being done. Acknowledge contributions, so both publicly and privately, just like you would here in the US. So if you're working with an international partner and they have done something incredible, definitely acknowledge their contribution and how it has been helpful to the project and the team, right? Also using participatory decision making. So I think this is important early on, where you talk about, again, decisions that would have to be made, but then also you can incorporate this throughout the project. And this is common, right, with projects where you would have to go off script, right, because things have turned out differently than what you thought they were going to. What does that decision making look like, and include all the partners in that?
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I just think we all have to realize that we always feel most of the time that like we have a great idea if we're willing to bring it to the table, but sometimes that isn't what everyone else is thinking or how they want to proceed. And so sometimes I think just recognizing and saying, I hear what you're saying, but this is the direction, does make someone feel like their opinion is being heard. Yes. And then, even though it's not going to be used.
Yes, absolutely. And I think looking too for feedback about yourself, which can be hard, right? But I have realized in my career, I try my hardest not to jump to being defensive or reactionary. And this is really important internationally too, if you're getting communication back, not to just assume like, from this email, somebody's upset with you or you did something wrong. You just have to take it for what it states, right? And being reflective on that and not jumping to conclusions based on a tone of something.
I agree. I mean, and this isn't even just international, but just collaborating with some, when we send text messages or emails, we don't realize what's happening on the other side. And sometimes someone is in a meeting or they're swamped with other things, but they want to feel like they're responsive. And so just a quick reply sometimes seems brass or a little harsh, but the answer really is that wasn't meant like that at all. It was just that they were under the gun to try to get something out quickly so that they felt responsive. And we all have to be mindful of that it happens more than we think it does.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm wondering if you can talk to us about the role that we as nurse practitioners can play in international health initiatives, and then how can we leverage really our unique skills within those collaborations?
Yeah. So remember, you hold a ton of knowledge. So everybody listening to this is nurse practitioners. We have been trained. We work independently. We have so many skills, and there is so many things that we can do internationally to help medicine, help nursing, and just help mankind, right? I know that sounds funny, but truly. So global health outreach and medical missions, again, we talked about this briefly, but that's definitely one of these things. So looking at medical mission trips in different countries for underserved populations. If you do, I don't know, if you're an acute care nurse practitioner, maybe look for more acute care roles. If you're family, this could be more community education. Nurse practitioners can be involved in clinical training programs. So looking at, again, underserved communities, and we do this a bit with ASH 360, where we are looking, because we have established occupational health standards pretty well here in the United States. So looking internationally about how we translate this to other countries, right? So whatever your expertise is, you could definitely bring a benefit to other countries internationally. And then also collaborative research on global health issues. So we know that there is many, many global health issues, HIV, AIDS, other infectious diseases. How do we work collaboratively to bring a lens and a scope on those specific issues? Disaster response, humanitarian relief efforts. We see a lot of medical personnel help with that. Really, really important. So that's a way that this could be accomplished. And then, of course, policy development and advocacy. I do not know, unfortunately, a whole lot about how nurse practitioners work internationally. However, I do think as we are seeing more and more states here in the U.S. have full practice, I think that we look like we are doing it right, and that we've been trained correctly. So just bringing that advocacy internationally would be incredible. And then also policy development as well.
One of the things, I was just at AANP, the conference, and the first couple of days they had a kind of a fast or flash Spanish speaking course. And I was so excited because I do think that learning communication skills, even in other languages,
Yes.
can benefit nurse practitioners, whether you go on a medical mission trip or whether you want to collaborate with a company international on something healthcare related. So I think we have to look at, like, again, the bigger picture and not just look at a small box about what we can do or initiatives that we can do to collaborate internationally.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you provide a specific example of a successful international collaboration that you've had, and really how, as a nurse practitioner, it made a significant impact?
Yeah. So as mentioned earlier, a couple months ago, I worked, and this was one of my bigger projects. So I worked specifically with an international tech company to address accommodations needed so accommodations are something coming from restrictions. So employees have some kind of medical issue where they have restrictions, and then accommodations is how, as a medical provider, you help them work safely. So a couple months ago, I worked with this very large company to address accommodations needed for their employees. It was, again, one of my lengthier projects. It was really fun. It's helped me think in a different way. And that's what, so you have to have a good clinical knowledge base to do this, right? But you also have to think legally. So what is legal, what is fair, what is equitable, because we really want to make sure that we are doing the right thing for the patient, right? And making sure that they can work safely. So that is the first one that comes to my mind recently. So
what kind of lessons would you share with us about what was learned from that experience, or another experience, about ways that things that could be done better, things that you wouldn't change at all? Is there any lessons learned from that?
I would say when I first started doing it, learning how to write in the way that I needed to was difficult. So the lesson learned, again, was not to take things defensively. So when my boss was coming back to me and saying, I think you're on the right track, but I don't quite understand this, I did not get defensive about it. I listened to him and absorbed that knowledge, and it was really helpful for me. So the lesson learned, again, is to be patient. This is consulting is a whole different world than what I have been involved in. Again, my time at the mill definitely prepared me. My time in academia prepared me, but it is different. So be patient with yourself, give yourself grace related to, these specific tasks that you have to accomplish, and just keep working at it. I mean, there were some long nights when I was doing this, but again, because I wanted to learn, I can see the benefit of me having the skill set, just because it is something totally different. So I dedicated the time, I sectioned off the time with my children, my family, knowing when they would go to sleep and when I needed to make these phone calls and would adjust my sleep schedule. And it was definitely worth it. It was a really valuable experience for me.
I'm so glad, and I'm glad that you ventured out to see what else was out there as a nurse practitioner and as a leader. We all need to measure outcomes, right? This is actually what we like to call research, but it really helps us guide everything forward. And so let me know how you measure the success of a collaboration or a consultation internationally, and what kind of metrics do you feel are important in assessing your outcomes?
Yeah, I would say you definitely need to develop both qualitative and quantitative metrics. So looking both at what people are telling you, and then also having some numbers stating whether you accomplished your goal or not are going to be important. So key performance indicators. So these would be primary objectives that you would set before you start the project, right? So gaining a scope of the project, talking about how you are going to accomplish that. So what are the objectives that you're going to obtain? And then speaking to a way, again, is this going to be measured qualitatively, quantitatively, but setting all that up before you start the project is going to be important. Also looking at your deliverables. So looking at time, always get a specific, even with my boss, when he gives me a project, I will say, okay, do you want this back in 2 days, 5 days, whatever. I always get a specific from him. So being very specific about timelines and what the expectations are and what the outcome is that you are going to bring. So impact metrics, you can definitely do these. So it would be health clinical outcomes for healthcare, research outputs for research, and then you can also look at economic or business impact. So new markets entered, revenue growth, or cost savings. And again, you would specify this based on what your consulting job is.
Well, and a lot of times I think that because we're clinically based, right? Most of us, we're not thinking about metrics, but metrics is the only way to show impact in order to move any project forward so that we can say, yes, this is making a difference and this is how, and I have the numbers to show that.
Yes.
So great answer. I also think truly international collaborations just aren't about sharing your expertise. There are opportunities really to learn evidence-based practices that transform practices in general and a clinical approach.
Yes. Yeah. The skills, the soft skills too, gained from this experience have been absolutely incredible, just in the growth in myself. So it's been really fun.
I also say pay attention to what people are saying in the periphery, because while it's not documented as a metric, it does give you an idea of how people are responding to a project or to an implementation based on really just what they're saying in hallway passing, or as I call it, water cooler talk. Sometimes you gain the most information that way because it's just not being written, in a piece of paper that you want it to be as a metric.
Absolutely.
In your experience, how can nurse practitioners sustain long-term international collaborations? And what do you think are some ongoing strategies that can help maintain engagement and productive relationships?
So building on some of those concepts we talked about earlier, so making sure that culturally and ethnically you are considerate, right? So having, this sounds so simple, but having people like you and want to have you back in their organization, and then making sure that you're sticking to the plan. So when you have consulted on one project, that you are timely, you're responsive, you are putting out good work. If you do have quantitative or qualitative metrics that you have established, you are providing those, that regular communication, just showing people the worth of you and your consulting practice is going to be huge. But then also, as I started to talk about, just making sure that they want to see you back, I think, in relation to what you bring. Also, you can look at sustainability. So sustainability is going to be huge and this is not only internationally, but here in the US, if you bring a project to somebody and it's not sustainable or it costs too much money, it's like, what's the point? So you've got to, from the beginning, think about the sustainability. So if you bring a project to somebody in a different country, and once you leave, it's going to leave with you. I mean, that's not going to be something that they're going to want to go back to.
I also think understanding that international collaborations really require an understanding of different time zones, platform preferences, regulations, because even, HIPAA, what we have in the United States, we have to adhere to HIPAA, but we also need to understand and know the equivalent laws globally so that we're following both, especially in a collaboration.
Yes. And that's what's been nice working with an employer, because they've got me all set up so that I am compliant, right? So
yeah. Looking ahead, how do you envision the future of advanced practice in nursing and intertwining that with international collaborations?
I'm hoping more advanced practice nurses can definitely expand into this world, because it's incredible. And there's so much impact we can make, again, just based on our skills, our education, our skills from even how we deal with patients is so unique, being that we are looking at that holistic focus. So I'm just hoping that more people look for these opportunities and try to pursue them. Again, I think I've been really blessed that things have kind of fallen into my lap. And I do say that I know that it wasn't, I know that there was certain positions that put me in the road for these positions. I do understand that. So it wasn't just totally falling into my lap, but put yourself out there, network, see who you can meet, talk to people, attend conferences. And if you have a passion to do this, think about ways that you can accomplish it. So what do you need to do to meet the right people to put you in these scenarios?
hmm And sometimes that means reaching out to them. You mentioned LinkedIn earlier, but there's lots of platforms that we can just send a little message that said, I would really like to, be part of something within your organization, even if that means volunteering
Yep.
or, trying to get your foot in the door that way. I think sometimes it's up to us to reach out because we know what we want to do and what we're good at.
I agree with that. I think too, looking back at my career, a lot early on, I definitely spent volunteering and just reaching out to people. I mean, I remember reaching out to editors of magazines or journals. Can I write for you? And nothing ever came about it, but I was definitely reaching out, offering my services for free. And I think that has helped with my networking as well.
Mhm. Well, now it's time for my absolutely favorite segment of the show, and it's exactly why we call it MP-POWs. So as we wrap up our time together, I would love for you to share one or two of your most valuable POWs, those pearls of wisdom that have truly made a difference in your work in international collaborations. And really tell us what insights you have discovered that our incredible nurse practitioner community could take with them and put into practice right away. The little golden nuggets that our listeners are always excited to hear.
Okay. So I would say sustaining long-term international collaborations. So making sure that they stick right is going to require intentional relationship building, cultural humility, cultural sensitivity, and that commitment to shared goals. So, and you can start to incorporate this with your everyday practice with when you are talking to your patients, when you're talking to other people you work with, trying to work on your communication skills and making sure that you're being clear. So start to put it into practice now so that when these international opportunities come about, that you have practice and that you have kind of established that. So ongoing strategies that help us maintain engagement is going to be regular meetings, periodic in-person visits or virtual visits, looking at collaborative planning that is going to look at capacity building, ensuring that projects empower local healthcare providers rather than creating codependency. So I think that's important with the international consulting as well. So you don't want to create codependency, as we kind of talked about. If you're going to bring a proposal to a different country, it has to be something sustainable with who they have there, and it can't cost them $1 million. You know what I mean? Unless they have $1 million. So definitely look at that. And then also, and this is something that you can do too in your practice every day, celebrating those shared successes, being adaptable to change, and remaining committed to continuous learning so that further relationships can be built.
I appreciate that so much, more than you know. I think that those little pearls of wisdom are things that just stick with people and can get them started and going the right way. I know that I have gained a lot of knowledge from you today, Dr. Spain. I learned a lot, not only about collaborations in general, but how to expand and implement on an international level. I think the bottom line from today is really to approach international collaborations with curiosity. And you used the word cultural humility, and then a willingness to teach and learn. So I just want you to know that I truly appreciate all that you have done to lead nurse practitioners to collaborative efforts across the world. And thank you for sharing your time, your insights, and really your powerful words. I shouldn't say worlds, but it is international. Words of wisdom on the NP-POW videocast.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I also want to thank all of our viewers and hope that you come back to hear more words of wisdom from our NP experts in the future. Until then, this is Julia Rogers wishing you joy today and every day.
For more great content from the Nurse Practitioner, be sure to visit us online at tnpj.com for the latest NCPD articles, columns, and much more. Please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify, as it helps with the podcast's visibility and helps us to keep bringing you this great content. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at The Nurse Practitioner Journal and on X at TNPJ_journal. This podcast does not constitute medical advice and should not be taken as such, and does not replace professional judgment or advice. The ideas and viewpoints expressed on this podcast do not reflect the official position of the speakers, authors, affiliated organizations, the Nurse Practitioner Journal, or Wolters Kluwer. Thanks for listening.